Hey, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to post a short video, kind of going over the material from chapter five. Um, as with us moving forward, I am supposed to or can still give assessments and tests. So my plan right now is that I am going to give you a test on chapter five. The test will be next Friday, which I think is April 17th. I'll post that test on that day. Obviously, it's going to be a different type of test. It's going to, given the circumstances, have to be open note because there's no way that I can ensure that you're taking a test without notes. So, and given the circumstances, I don't think that I can give you a test like normal. So this will just be an open note test. And I've been posting a lot of those assignments that have sort of hit home to some of the key themes and ideas from the chapter, but I figured it would kind of work well to go through the chapter just a little bit. You guys are all smart kids. You know what's going on. You can run through my notes pretty well on your own, probably, but I still wanted to go through and sort of explain sort of key ideas here. The entire chapter is pretty much just about personality development. How do we become who we are? Our personality is our sum total of behaviors. It's everything that makes us us. It's your attitudes, it's your beliefs, it's your values. It's everything that makes up your individual. Personality traits are oftentimes created based off of the environments we live in. If you grow up in a rich family, you'll have a different personality than if you grow up in a poor family. Our personalities tend to be very individually unique. There's no guarantee or certainty that you'll always like have one type of a personality. Just because you grow up in a rich family doesn't mean you'll have the same personality traits as every other rich person. Just because you are the firstborn child doesn't mean that you'll always have the same personality trait every other firstborn child. And our personalities are developing for our entire lifetime. They never stop growing. They never stop changing. The most obvious time period of personality development is during our childhood. Those are some of our most formative years. But as you get older, your personality is still going to develop. It's still going to change. Things can happen to you, good things, bad things. Like, for instance, if you get into a car accident, that can change your personality for the remainder of your life. So, personality does change. Going on to the next slide here. For those of you that took psychology with Mr. Riley or are taking psychology, you've probably heard of the phrase nature versus nurture. I know I've talked about that a lot myself. Sociologists oftentimes look at the question of like what determines personality more. Our natural instincts, our heredity or aptitudes, or is it our the nurturing side, the ability to learn behaviors and learn personality? There's no solid answer to that. I mean, some people can have natural aptitudes, natural skills and behaviors that they're born with, but they can learn new instincts. They can learn new behaviors. So there's no solid answer of what is more important, nature or nurture. So just a moment on that slide there. Here's a little bit about the birth order effect. I know one of the readings I posted had you sort of go through um, the various places in which somebody can be born into a family. And I'm not going to go over all of those with you. If you go to the very end of the notes, I sort of have this one little table or this one note section where I talk about some of those. So, like, if you're the firstborn child, you have um, a different personality than if you were the last-born child. Disregard this writing on here. This all has to do with last-born children. Last-born children tend to be very different from first-born children. So um, disregard some of the writing by it there. Going back up to the birth order here. Um, I don't think there's anything else that I kind of want to go over there. So, um, getting into childhood isolation, sociologists have sometimes looked at and studied um, feral children. There are a handful of noteworthy historic examples of feral children, and there's not a lot of examples. Like what a feral child is somebody who is like truly and truly wild or untamed. They don't have any or very few human interactions. Kind of the stereotype of a feral child is Mowgli from Jungle Book. If you've ever watched that cartoon, the movie, they Mowgli is a feral child. He has no human interactions. He's raised by a bear in the woods. Um, Obviously, it's a Disney cartoon, and they it's not realistic. But if you take a baby, if you take a small child, and you raise it without human interactions, that child will be less human than a child that's born and raised in a family with loving, caring parents. So I mean, there are a handful of examples. I've got these notes here about Anna and Isabel. Anna was a child born in Pennsylvania who was basically abused and malnourished and underfed. When she was eventually found at the age of 6, she was extremely small, couldn't walk, couldn't talk. She had a flat affect, meaning that she had like no expression. She couldn't express emotion. She was eventually able to teach herself how to walk. She was able to brush her hair, brush her teeth, learn short English phrases, but she died at a very young age. She died at the age of 10 as a result of the malnourishment. Isabel is sort of a similar situation. She was sort of abused by her grandfather and sort of isolated from people. She wasn't spoken to. She could only communicate through hand gestures because her mother and grandfather wouldn't talk to her. When she was found, she would only eat with her hands and would grunt like an animal. She would gradually sort of grow and learn some human-like behaviors. But one of the most noteworthy like stories is the story of Jeannie. And I gave you guys that reading assignment. I think it was yesterday, where you had to read a little bit about the story of Jeannie. She's still alive to this day. She's in her early 60s. Nobody really knows exactly where she's at, but she is living in the state of California in a home of some sort. The state of California has always been very protective of her privacy and her secrecy because she, in a way, in the 1970s became um, a tabloid fascination. She was an odd story. She was a 13-year-old girl who um, her father hated her and would isolate her in her bedroom. She would either be tied to a potty chair the entire day or she'd be tied on a straitjacket into her bed. Her father would not speak to her, would only bark at her like a dog to communicate with her. If she ever made noise, she would oftentimes get beat with a piece of wood as punishment. Her toys were jokes. Her father would throw plastic raincoats on the floor, empty food containers for her to play with. When she was found at the age of 13. But sociologists and social workers thought she was roughly about the age of 6 because she was so small. So she was extremely malnourished. Um, by the age of 21, she was considered to be a total lost cause. She was completely unable to be well adjusted to society and was put into a facility in California where, as I said, now in her early 60s, she still lives. Another similar topic is the idea of institutionalization. Institutionalization is a long time studied topic that you can either look at orphans, kids that are living in orphanages, or sometimes prisoners or inmates living in prisons. So it's a fairly large topic. In the context of what this chapter is about, I typically look at the impact that institutions like orphanages have on young children. There's a famous study done in the mid 40s where a group of kids living in orphanages were studied for something like 20 or 30 years. And it was determined that because in these orphanages, kids aren't getting quite the same love and human contact that children in a normal household would be getting. One third had died within 2 years of the study. So if you, I'm going to make up numbers, you take 100 kids within 2 years, 33 of those kids would just be dead because of lack of love, lack of caring. So part of that is because they become so attached to the institution that if they ever leave that institution, they don't know how to take care of themselves and they have no ability to care for themselves. Um, Scrolling through most of the rest of this, I always tend to focus on three individuals and sort of their view of how personality is developed. We got John Locke. If you've taken civics, I've always talked about John Locke um, and his natural rights. He went into great detail about something called the tabula rasa or the blank slate. He believed that individuals were born as a blank slate, like babies are a blank piece of paper, and that their personality is developed by those that are around them. That they could be raised in any manner that a parent wants. We've got Charles Cooley and his looking glass self. I would imagine everybody knows what a looking glass mirror is. He believed that individuals would develop their personality based off the way that they felt other people saw them. So if you saw yourself as fat and ugly, your personality will develop that way. If you see yourself as being attractive and athletic and good looking, your personality will develop that way as well. Sometimes it's referred to as the self fulfilling prophecy. And then we got George Mead, who would get into the idea of role taking, whereas young children, we oftentimes take on a role that we see ourselves taking on in the future, and we role play and play a game. So if a young kid thinks that they want to be a firefighter someday, they'll start behaving like a firefighter, and eventually they internalize it and they become a firefighter and take on those traits. This section here, pretty simple section. I'm not going to get into it. There's generally speaking four agents of socialization, four groups that will create our personalities. We have the family. I would argue is probably the most important agent of socialization. We have your peer groups, your friends, your school, and your mass media. So TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, stuff like that. Um, Maybe for the quiz, you're going to take in a bit, pay attention to the idea of resocialization. You're smart kids. I'm not going to explain that. And that's it. So that is it for chapter 5. Um, Now that you watch this video, you'll notice that there is a short quiz. I think it's 10 questions. Take a few minutes, take that quiz. It's an easy quiz if you paid attention. Use the notes, use online sources. It's not meant to be a hard, tricky quiz. Just something to assess you and make sure that you were going through and doing the work. So, see you later. Bye.